Welcome to a session of Ask Larry, which means whatever you want to talk about real estate related, we'll talk about here. I have 9 topics of things that happened in the last couple of weeks that we'll discuss also if you don't have anything. In order to speak, I've got you all muted, so you just have to unmute yourself. That way you can speak, okay? The reason I keep people muted is we don't want a bunch of background noise because Nestor does record this, and we do load it up onto our YouTube channel at Fairfax Realty. So any questions? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I would like to hear or learn how to use hard money lenders because I have a couple of investors who would like to buy and flip, but they don't have enough money for purchase.
Well, if you're going to use a hard money lender, I would use that adverse consequences form if they understand what they're getting into, because their interest rate's going to be high, and there's no fooling around with that. Okay, so your interest rate's going to be much higher, and it's a shorter term. So if they don't have the capability of pulling this back out in a reasonable amount of time, the appreciation probably wouldn't cover the cost of the money. So they got to be very, very careful. Have you looked at any terms from any of these hard loan lenders? They're usually meant for a very short term period of time.
That's fine,
not for long-term investment.
Yeah, that's fine. But how to find a reputable lender for these particular cases?
Well, I don't have any right now. I might have some up in the list of some in the office when I get back. But best way I would recommend is talk around the offices and see if anybody has used one that they can recommend. Anybody on here use one that you can recommend? You can let us know. But other than that, I would Google hard money lenders, Northern Virginia, and I'm sure you'll get a list. And then I would double check behind, do some Google research work to make sure they, very reputable. And then you might also check with the manager of the office to see if they know any.
Okay, good enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question?
I would like to say something about that issue that we were discussing. Certain bullies, I don't want to say any names, but they go to listings and they say, look, be careful with family, and I am like the owner of this particular area, and I can sell the property for $9,900 more. You should come with me and leave your agent. Stuff like that. And sometimes it's not easy to, if the person is a broker, you're just an agent, you don't want to say the wrong thing and get in trouble. So I don't know if it's the best way to contact your broker and have him contact the other broker to say, please back up, or you will not give me any other option to report you to the board? Or what should be the best way to proceed in this case?
Okay, so I would recommend broker to broker, and the reason being, it is the broker's listing. It is not your listing, even though you brought it in. Okay,
exactly.
So in the state of Virginia, it's broker's listing. First step is always, I recommend broker call the other broker to try to straighten it out. If not, that is a direct violation of our code of ethics. If that person is a member of the Association of Realtors. Remember, the code of ethics is only enforceable against realtors. So if you can't get satisfaction that way, then bring the charge at the board, and then the board will appoint what they call, let me think of the proper word here, person that will negotiate to see if you can come to an agreement before having an actual hearing. Ombudsman, they call them, and they try to work out where an apology's given and a person backs off, etc. If that doesn't work, then a hearing. And there's nothing actually in the law, the state of Virginia law, that says they couldn't talk to your client. It's a matter of ethics at our association, and most agents don't want to have to go through that, so they will back off. But I would have broker call broker, and if it's a heavyweight, the broker or the other side might not, want to address the issue with their party because they're their main income stream. But if there's a threat of a ethics hearing, that might be what's necessary to back off. And if they're saying derogatory things about the company or the agent, then the broker should definitely be stepping in and addressing that issue. Okay.
What was happening in this case?
He has a listing, in a big time agent with a team went to the owner and told him they should get rid of their agent and that they can get them $9,900 more for the house because they control the market in that area, etc. So you can't make direct contact with my client for any reason other than to show the home. So this is a direct violation of the code of ethics. It's several different articles. So, but generally you don't want to bring a charge against an agent because you have to work with them in the field. If they can be, if this issue can be addressed before you file a hearing. A lot of times people file hearings just because they want to get back at the other side. But this action, this type of stuff, needs to be addressed because direct violation. These hearings are not pleasant, let me tell you, not for either side. I am actually chairing a committee hearing for an ethics violation on the 29th. And it's no more pleasant for us on the other side of the table, the ones holding the hearing, than the one charged or bringing the charge. So I would say have the broker contact their broker. And you're over at the Falls Church office, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because Dave will definitely get involved if you talk to him and they're saying things about the company.
Also,
Can I ask you a question?
Wait a minute, let him finish. Hold on.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I did have an open house for brokers yesterday. She called my client. She said, I'm going to tell all my agents not to go to your listing and not to send you any contract. And she was so disturbed about it. And she said,
that's a different story. That's tortious interference. So definitely talk to Dave. Dave will definitely handle that.
Wow, it's unheard of.
Yeah.
What is the term? Interference?
Tortious interference. Yeah. Dave knows what it is.
Interference.
Yeah.
I hear you about saying something about this a long time ago, maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah. I can't believe she's actually doing that because I know the lady, but sometimes people get upset when they get beat out. Right. Okay,
Lottie, what kind of consequences this buyer's agent could get?
It's not a buyer's agent, it's a listing agent. So the penalties at the board is a fine not to exceed $15,000, education, suspension from the board. There's all types of things that can happen. But the main thing you want to do is make sure she backs off and stays away from your client, doesn't do it to anybody else. So it sounds to me like if they've done it in the past, they've been lucky to this point. They just haven't hit anybody that would fight back. So I can guarantee you you let Dave know this is going on. Dave will fight back.
What would you do if the board is partial?
Board can't be partial.
Well,
It-
I have a
it's in-
bad experience.
It's impartial. I can guarantee you. I'm involved in the process. Okay. And if you think somebody that's going to be conducting the hearing, because the board doesn't do it, it's all realtor volunteers. All the board does is process the stuff.
Because we
Okay.
have a bad experience with David. We went to a hearing, and what happened is this company has lawyers, right? And we
Well,
went.
you're talking arbitration.
Yeah, it escalates to arbitration. We went to the arbitration,
Yeah.
and a lawyer appeared, and then the person that you know, long story short, I show a property, and he ended up buying that property to another agent, and I did have an exclusive right to represent buyer's agreement, but this other agent is sneakily went directly, but the lawyer said that she went
Well,
to
once you told me you did not have a written buyer broker agreement, it's over.
I did have a exclusive right to represent buyer's agreement, and it was a new property.
So now you have the right to, you would have the right to sue the buyer. Okay. So for the commission, because that's who but you also have to do that through the broker. But now you probably only got to the ombudsman negotiating position where they sent one person out to hear both sides. You did not have to agree to that. You could have gone to a full arbitration hearing, but you've
How
got
long
to
you
have,
have to do that?
huh?
How long you have to do that?
1 year.
Oof, this is more than probably about a year ago.
Yeah.
Oh, 1 year from the arbitration?
No.
From the
From-
case.
Yeah. So, and I'm telling you, there's not many arbitration hearings, maybe 2 a year, because the brokers pretty much know, if you have a chance. And it's got to be the broker agreed to do it. Agents can't do it.
And you know what
Okay.
happened? Long story short, we were supposed to be brokers and agents, and when we went there, it was the buyer who was lying and stuff like that, and the granddaughter of the buyer, and he was a lawyer. And it was a lawyer. It was two brokers, a lawyer, the lady, and I was with David. They bullied us all the way.
Well, generally, if you're a firm large enough to have your own attorneys, that's a hard road.
We shouldn't
And if
agree
it-
to that in the first place.
if your client was lying, then that's not prejudiced by the association. That's prejudiced by your client.
He said
But
he
you
was.
could have sued. You could have gone to Dave and said, "I want to sue this party. We have a contract." If you have a written contractual relationship in Virginia, you still have the right to sue the buyer for the commission if it doesn't come from the other side. Are you willing to invest all that money in a lawyer to try to get the commission? And if you lose, you're out of the money. And therein lies the fly in the ointment. Okay,
That's the issue. That's the issue.
because you're working for 100% company, so you'd be responsible for the lawyer's fees. So at some point, you just suck it up and say, "I learned my lesson on this one," and hopefully you don't get involved in another one. But you're getting a second one here, so okay. So I understand your frustration, but the system does work. So the way it happens is that they give you a list of the people that will be on the hearing panels. You have the right to challenge people. Anybody has any relationship to either company or eliminated. So you do get an impartial hearing panel. I've actually pulled myself off of hearing panels because I had a preconceived notion of what I thought of that agent. So I literally disqualified myself.
Same thing happened with Ray Powell.
And I get challenged quite often. People don't want me on their hearing panel. So they said, because they've had me in class. So But yeah, the system works if everybody will take time to get involved, but not everybody will. Okay, because it's time consuming and it can get expensive when attorneys get involved. Right.
Yeah, I shouldn't
But
just
if you
say
ever,
no lawyer.
in an ethics hearing, you're better off hiring somebody like me that actually knows the system and whatever to represent you than an attorney, because our system's a little different than in a court of law. So I've actually had to tell attorneys when I'm, join the panel, that you're out of order here for our hearing.
Do you think I can
Change your
hire you for this case?
question. No, not for arbitration. That's money. You need an attorney for that. I'm talking about ethics. I have defended people in our company for ethics hearings, and I've won every one so far. Because if I go, I think you're innocent. But if you're guilty, I'm not going to go. I'm going to tell you,
Of course.
plead guilty and pay the fine and get it over with. Okay, so any other questions here today?
Yes, Larry, this is Maribel.
Okay, hi, Maribel.
How you doing?
I'm excellent. You?
Yeah, fine, thank you. Okay, I know this is not a question, but I think it's something that is happening in the market right now. You know, the inventory is really low. I noticed some people right now trying to put the block the days we have to show the property. For example, last week I'm gonna show one townhouse in Woodbridge. The weekend the property went to the market. Friday was blocked that day. Then Saturday was blocked all day, and Sunday was blocked. The listing agent say, okay, all the offer is gonna be present. I think Tuesday, and then okay, I noticed that the property have an open house. I think it's Saturday between 1 and 4, and I say to my client, okay, we're gonna go to the open house, and then you let me know if you like the property, because we need to send the property. Something is if you're gonna present the offer, why you block the day that the people had, to see the property? And then we went to the property. I asked my client say, okay, I'm thinking, okay, say the market is moving really fast, you don't have enough time. I know something is happening here. We went to the open house, so with the, this is a Hispanic area, and so with the person that is doing the open house, and she say, okay, I'm here to find buyers, okay? It's good. I know this is the reason that she is here, because she was not the listing agent. And Sunday, I call my client. I say, okay, I was thinking, but I say, oh, it's too late. The property is under contract right now. My client say, why they say the property is they're gonna review the offer Tuesday, and they put the property under contract. I say, something is happening in that house. I don't know why, but I noticed, because they blocked the day, and they only the person who wants to see the property was in the open house for find buyers. This is the first case. I have another property in Manassas. I went to show to the first day, and then that team say, no, we're gonna present the offers after the open house. They have open house Saturday and Sunday. But my client sent a really, really good offer, no contingency. I think it wants contingency, financial contingency, because it's a loan. They remove the appraiser. They put a lot of money for down payment and for the END. And I know that I need to push the listing agent, because I'm pretty sure they want to find a buyer, no? And it's not good for the seller, no? Because the seller doesn't know what is happening. And the thing right now, I'm trying to find the buyer and put the buyer on the property, It's not fair for us, no? Because the market is good for the seller, but if the seller don't receive, or they don't present all the offers, they don't know, the seller is not gonna know what happened, no? Because they say, okay, the seller decide to work with an offer. Damn, this is the email that you got. And it's not good, because how do you know that the seller, the listing agent present all the offers, They trying to, find the value for them.
Once again, it's up to the seller when they want to hear the contract. So even if they say Tuesday, any contract that comes in should be presented to them when it comes in. So even if they tell you all offers are going to be Tuesday, your party needs to put their offer in. Okay. Now, 3-2 of our code of ethics, 3-2 of our code of ethics changed this year to say that if a broker asks the other broker in writing if the contract was presented, they must respond. Okay. So once again, it's not going to help your buyer client, but if the contract wasn't presented, it will be a violation of the code of ethics, or they have written instructions that the contract not be presented. So our code of ethics changed, but our code of ethics is only as good as the people working, right? Unless charges are brought. But a broker is broker to broker, not agent to agent. Okay. So now there is a way to find out. Now, the only party that could say they were damaged would be the seller. They would have to go after their agent. Okay. Your buyer has no recourse. So unfortunately, that's the way it is. Will it be this way forever? No, eventually this market will change back, and then there'll be more, more listings than buyers, and buyer agents will probably start taking advantage of the listing agents. So, it's not pretty out there right now. I grant you. Nice thing about Florida, we went out looking at houses, yesterday, because I'm thinking about buying a house and keeping the the listing agents have been calling us back because it's not as hot a market down here as it is up there. People are chasing us to try to get us to buy. So it's a little different situation. Not every property. Some properties go immediately. So walked into one open house and they said, well, we sold the one next door in 24 hours. I said, yeah, but this has been on the market for 32 days. So I'm a real estate broker. Don't try to take me out. But it's not pleasant out there. I grant you. But at least now with the code of ethics, Mary Bell, you could have Kevin request from the other broker that the contract was presented, or they had written instructions from the owner not to bring it. Okay.
Okay.
Larry, it means the listing agent supposed to write to every buyer's agent that the contract was presented?
No, it means that if your broker, your manager, okay, sends a written request to the other manager, they must respond if your contract was presented, okay, or they had written instructions not to. But you don't have to let every agent know that your contract was presented. Now,
there is no any evidence after that if it's presented or not.
No, but most brokers aren't going to lie to another broker in writing that the contract was presented. Okay, you can't go back directly to that owner, right? Because you're not representing them. But what if later on, your buyer should run into that seller and ask, why your contract for more money wasn't presented? Then the seller would probably be upset. You can't do it, but I don't know anything that prevents them. But I'm not recommending having your buyers call sellers. Don't get me wrong. But we can only, I believe in all other agents until they give me a reason not to, that they're lying to me. I don't take it from the worst case situation, but that is a new avenue available broker to broker now to make sure that your contract was presented. It doesn't get your buyer the house, but at least the seller, had everything to make their decision on all the contracts. Okay, and sometimes you'll go online and you'll check, and the contract that was accepted was for less money than yours, and it was the listing agent. And you say, well, my contract was never presented. It may have been presented. It's just that the money wasn't the most important factor to the seller. Okay, there might have been another driving factor more important to the seller. The listing agent knew that, and therefore their contract went through. Don't always necessarily believe it's money. okay? Because sometimes there could be other things involved that we don't know about. And I'm sure you've had situations yourself where, you know, other things entered into the decision other than the most money.
Larry, how does the foreign investments works? If someone wants to purchase, are they still open to buy? Like, I have some foreigners, they want to invest, like cash buyers.
Yeah, they can still buy as long as the cash is here in the United States.
They just have to wire funds.
Huh? Yeah, they would do wired funds.
Do we have to
but
work with title company?
do we have what?
Do we have to work with title company or lender? Lenders won't be involved, right, in this situation?
No lenders, but you still would use a title company for settling. Yeah. You don't have to, but I would advise it.
Mhm. Okay.
So is the money in the United States?
No, it's a foreigners investing,
I know.
like trying to buy
Are they
property.
on the list? Or so you have to make sure that they're not on the list where the money can't come into the United States, and how long will it take to get the money into the United States? Because most investors don't want to bring their money into the States until they have to, because maybe tax consequences. So you've got to make sure that how long it will take to get that money cleared, because you don't want them to be in default, even though it's a cash deal.
Okay.
Okay. And there's certain countries that, you know, they can't bring the money in, or they may have a limit on how much they can bring in. So get that straightened out, you know, first, right?
From accountant, financial institutions?
Yeah. Well, it used to be, what was it? HSBC or something, another bank that, you know, could really help you out. I'm not sure who it was now. Maybe when I get back, I'll be able to find it in my office. I'm still in Florida, so.
Okay.
Okay, but you know, double check, and actually, you could probably find a Google and find a list of, you know, requirements for bringing money in from different countries.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I have a few things that have come up that I want to discuss. One is, can a seller void a contract? Okay, because you hear all the time the seller's tired, they want to void a contract. There's only two parts of our contract that allows a seller to void. Everything else, it's up to the buyer if they want to void. Okay, so a seller pretty much has to ride it out to the end unless it's these two situations. Okay, paragraph 20. Okay, if you look at paragraph 20, it says if the title work is not ready. Okay, so if you found paragraph 20 in your contract, okay, page 7 of the package, it says if the title work is not ready at settlement, then settlement date may be delayed for up to 10 business days to obtain title report and survey, after which this contract, so another 14 days past settlement if the title work's just not ready. Not a title problem. Title work's not ready. At the option of the seller, may be terminated and the deposit refunded in full. Okay, so the seller is not entitled to any of the earnest money, but they could, after you go past that 10 days. Why is it at the option of the seller and not the buyer if the title work's not ready? Because under paragraph 3, who was supposed to order the title within 10 days? The buyer. Okay, so that would be one time. The other would be paragraph 35, time is of the essence, and that deals with, so time of the essence. At midnight on the day of settlement, this contract is void. It's over if we haven't settled, right? I know we continue on and we go to settlement all, but paragraph 35, time is of the essence means dates and time frames agreed to by the parties must be met. Failure to meet stated dates or time frames will result in a waiver of contractual rights or will be a default under the terms of the contract. Okay. Now, here's where the buyer has the right to void. See, because it's automatically void at midnight, so they don't have to void, you know, at that point. If this contract is contingent on financing and financing has not been removed or satisfied, any delay of the settlement date necessary to comply with buyer or lender's obligations pursuant to RESPA integrated disclosure rule is not a default by the buyer, but seller may declare contract void in writing. Now, that doesn't mean that the lender's just not ready with the loan. Okay, if they're not ready with the loan, your contract is over at midnight unless it's extended in writing by all parties prior to the midnight that day. Now, what this means, if between the loan estimate and the closing disclosure, there's more than a 1/8% interest rate increase, then that requires a new 3-day disclosure by the lender to the purchaser. If there's a prepayment penalty added that wasn't in the loan estimate, requires a new 3-day period. Or if the party underwriting the loan no longer is underwriting and they have to put somebody else in their position, a different company, that requires a new 3-day extension. And that's the only time that this extension would kick in. However, the seller does not have to agree to it. The seller could void the contract and move forward, but they don't get any money. The deposit goes back to the purchaser. Those are the only 2 times. Everything else in here for voiding is for the purchaser, right? Home inspection, POA condo, financing, appraisal. Those are all the buyer's right to void, including paragraph 20, where there's an actual title problem on the day of settlement. The purchaser could void the contract without any penalty. Okay, so page 28 is your home inspection. We've gone over that, right? POA and condo on page 4. Financing, that's where you find all these different rights for the buyer to void. Now, here is a question that has come up. If they're in paragraph 28, okay, it says the purchaser forfeits their money to the seller if they choose that as liquidated damages and not as a penalty. Okay, so if you read Virginia law, liquidated damages is when damages cannot be ascertained. Okay, so if I had a $50,000 earnest money deposit with you, okay, and I default and you send over a release asking me for all 50,000, I'm probably getting an attorney. Okay, if these situations happen, you put the house back on the market immediately, you got a contract immediately for the same amount of money or more. Okay, and you settle within 30 to 45 days. Unless you have a $50,000 a month house payment, how did your damages equal 50,000? Okay, so I may say, no, I'm going to get an attorney. I'm willing to give you 5,000 because that's what your actual damages are. You say, well, no, you agreed to liquidate. Well, check out our law. Okay, you may find that, hey, my attorney can save me that money, right? So be reasonable with your liquidated damages. What's going to actually, be your cost, right? Not saying, because you don't want to say, no, that's a penalty, okay? Our law does not allow penalties, okay? Law does not allow penalties. So it's not going to be a penalty, right? You might want to turn off your camera, Mauricio, because we're seeing what's in your refrigerator. There you go. It looked good. Now, also, a little warning. If your purchaser, the purchaser of your listing says, they aren't going to come to settlement, right? They don't have the loan. Your seller should still go to settlement. they should still sign the paperwork, even though everybody's gonna think you're crazy, all right? Because at that point, now you can prove what your damages are, right? If you had a contract for 500,000 and they didn't show up and you resell the house for 480,000, plus you had additional expenses, etc., now it's easy for a judge to figure out damages. The flip of that, okay, it says in paragraph 28, if the buyer defaults for any reason except for a default by the seller. Okay, if your seller doesn't show up at settlement, if I'm an attorney, I'm going to probably say, well, they defaulted too. I mean, my person didn't show up, but they didn't either. So how can there be damages? I don't take a chance. I tell my seller we still have to show up. Now, at midnight on the day of settlement, there's no longer a contract. Could the seller put their house back on the market? I think they could without a release. However, they better make sure that they did not cause a default in the contract. Okay.
What would happen if the seller caused the default in the contract?
If they default, then you got a double default. Then the judge is going to say, well, where are your damages, seller? You defaulted also. So how could you claim to want the deposit? Okay. Now, so if I'm an agent, I'm probably going to try to keep my earnest money deposit as low as possible. If I'm a purchaser, because I'll walk away from 1,000 or two. It's not worth my headache. But if I've got 50,000 on a $300,000 house, because my agent said one way to make us look better than the other contracts is we give them 50,000, and you're the listing agent, you say to the seller, wow, 50,000. If they default, you get 50 grand. No, you don't. It's an escrow, right? This is an escrow. That belongs to both parties. So unless one party agrees to release it, you get nothing, seller. You might still be able to put your house on the market. So I don't get that bent out of shape. I like to see the earnest money deposit sort of what would be equal to the damages, so that liquidated damages is not a penalty. So just be aware. Don't tell them that they get the money if the buyer defaults, because they might not get all that, because it cannot be a penalty. So if you look at paragraph 28 of your sales contract, okay, and Virginia does not allow penalties in contracts, okay? They allow damages, they don't allow penalties. So it says that if buyer fails to complete settlement for any reason other than a default by the seller, buyer shall be in default, and at the option of the seller, the deposit may be forfeited to seller as liquidated damages and not as a penalty. But liquidated damages, the definition in Virginia is, we couldn't really determine what the penalty will be, and I just don't see that in our situation. So I know we have a situation now where the attorney wrote a letter saying, we're going to take this to court unless you get reasonable about the request, because it could not possibly be this much. Okay. So, any questions about that?
Larry, I have a question. If the buyer asks to the seller for an extension, and the seller give 1 week an extension, and then the buyer asks for 1 week more, and the seller doesn't want to give 1 week, and they don't have any addendum, the seller can keep the earnest money deposit?
No. Okay, the seller doesn't get the deposit unless the buyer agrees to release it or a judge gives it to them.
Okay.
Okay.
If the seller sends the release and the buyer doesn't want to sign,
well, then the money stays in escrow.
And then what is the next step? By court?
Well, the next step would be a threat of an attorney to sue, okay, for damages if they don't release the money as liquidated damages. And the problem with that, okay, is that paragraph 26 says, if I have to sue you, whichever party has to sue for a breach of contract terms, and they win, then you have to pay all my attorney fees also. So if this is a buyer that has a $2,000 deposit and they've defaulted and they don't want to sign a release, tell them, if the owner is willing to let them out for $2,000, sign it and run, okay? Because if the other side has to get an attorney and you defaulted on the contract, you're going to end up having to pay all their attorney fees also. So how many hours of attorney fees does $2,000 get you? Not many, right?
No.
Maybe 2-3 hours. So you gotta have a heart-to-heart with your buyers. But you know, the problem is agents don't make sure buyers understand this. And to a lot of people, $2,000 is their life savings. To them, they don't want to let it go. But you should have never entered into a contract if you couldn't do it. Okay, you shouldn't have ever entered if you can't do it. So,
Okay, but what happens if the seller wants to put them again in the market because they ask for 1 week and then ask for more 1 week, and the title company said that they didn't ask for the title work? It means that the loan is no.
well, the buyer's the one that had to ask for the title work, not the seller.
Yes,
So-
yes, but we know that.
So there's a default on the behalf of the buyer. In paragraph 35, time is of the essence. These dates are written in stone. If your buyer doesn't settle, okay, it says failure to meet stated date times will result in waiver of contractual rights or default under the terms of the contract. So if it's a default and you lost your contractual rights under the contract, it's over at midnight that day. I think the seller has every right to put it back on the market and, you know, not worry about it as long as they didn't also default somewhere along the lines. So
nice.
it's always better if you can get a release signed by all parties before you put it on the market, but technically it's not required.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
But always refer your clients to attorneys, right? Because we can't give
Okay.
legal advice.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, also power of attorneys. I had a question about a power of attorney. If you have a general power of attorney or specific for a real estate transaction, it is only good as long as a party is alive. Okay. Once they die, that power of attorney is over. So if you entered into a listing agreement under power of attorney and the party dies after it's under contract, now the estate takes over. You don't have power of attorney anymore. Okay. The question was that we were dealing with, it was tenants by the entireties. Okay. The husband had died and the mother, the guy's mother was in the hospital, was in care, and he had power of attorney for the mother. Did he need power of attorney for the father? No, the father's dead. You can't have a power of attorney for someone who is dead. But in tenants by the entirety, everything would go to the mother, who was the wife of the person that had passed away. So his power of attorney would be good for that act. Okay. But anytime you have a question, always talk to one of the lawyers with RTS or whatever. Okay. Now, the other warning I will give you about a power of attorney: make sure it is drafted in accordance with Virginia law and is recordable in the state of Virginia. There's nothing worse than getting to a settlement with a power of attorney and the attorney looks at it and says, well, this is not good for Virginia. Now you got to try to hustle and get a new power of attorney from wherever, and it's just not good. So anytime I'm dealing with a power of attorney, I have it drafted by Louisa here at our Tyson's office. I want to make sure it's recordable and acceptable to the company that's going to be doing the settlement and the lenders. Okay. There's one other thing I want to talk about, or two. Virginia Rent and Mortgage Relief Program, RMRP. Okay. The the governor of Virginia put some more money out there and also made it available for the landlord to apply on behalf of their tenant. So if you know of a landlord or you're a landlord and have a tenant that can't pay their rent because it's been reduced income, etc., then I would go to virginiahousing.com, virginiahousing.com / capital R, capital M, capital R, capital P. So virginiahousing.com /RMRP, and you can actually make an application on behalf of your tenant who is not able to pay their rent to maybe get some of your rent back, okay, to help them. They can also go to the Virginia website. You can do they can do a self-analysis to see if they're eligible for this, or they can just dial 211 from your iPhone, and you will reach Virginia that will answer questions about that program. So if you go to the NVAR's website, they have information about this, and also VAR's website. So if you know somebody in that situation, because the federal government's not allowing any foreclosures or evictions until January 1. So might be a situation to help somebody stay in a property and get some of your rent back. Okay. The other question I had, can a buyer bring a home inspector for the walkthrough? My interpretation, and they also checked with the board, no. You might get away with that if you had a home inspection and you just bring them back to confirm the stuff was fixed. But no, if there was no home inspection contingency, you do not have the right as a buyer to bring a home inspector. It says the walkthrough inspections will be done by the buyer or the buyer's representative. Buyer's representative is an agent who has entered into a contractual relationship in writing to represent the buyer. Okay, the seller does not have to allow that party in the house. They only have to allow them in to do appraisals and preliminary and other inspections as called for in the contract. Okay, and the final one for today, what's a fixture and what's not? Okay, so we had several questions in the past week, and so when they did the walkthrough, the chandelier was gone and the fireplace enclosure screen was gone. So the chandelier, unless it's written in the contract that the purchaser can take it, that is a fixture. They should bring it back. This has not been the nicest of transactions. You know, a lot of stuff went back and forth and the seller had to pay a lot of money. They may have just taken the chandelier out of spite, okay? I've seen that happen. But they could be asked to bring that chandelier back, okay? But you might have to get an attorney. Now, the fireplace screen, was it attached to the fireplace or just sitting there? Because that would still be personal property. And then we had the one with the island in the middle of the kitchen, okay? Is that a fixture or is that personal property? Well, was it permanently attached to the floor? If not, it's personal property. So a lot of these things you buy on Wayfair or all these different sites you can go to, you just set it in the middle of the floor. So when in doubt, write everything in the contract, you know, list every single item, okay? That way there's no doubt, okay? I've seen outside fire pits that looked like they were attached, you know, grills, but they were just grills, you know, sitting there and the people took the grills. You know, I mean, you got to list it out. And it doesn't matter what the listing said. You understand? It does not matter what was in the listing, only what's in the contract. So if it listed something that conveys, you know, that you have question about whether it conveys, list it in the contract, period.
I have a question, Larry.
Okay?
Larry? Can you hear me,
Yeah.
Larry? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Do you have time to explain the finance contingency with automatic extension and automatic expiration, and the difference between the two?
Okay, so with paragraph 3 of the finance contingency,
Mhm.
okay, that is with automatic extension. So if you had 21 days for your financing contingency,
Mhm.
the 21st day, 9 p.m. has come, all right? That contingency continues on until settlement date, 9 p.m. on settlement date, unless the seller has sent over the notice that you have not removed this contingency. At that point, when your buyer gets that notice, okay, they have 3 days from that period to void their contract, or they go forward with no contingency. So paragraph 3 with automatic extension goes all the way to settlement date, and at that date it ends if it hasn't been removed, unless you receive the notice from the seller to the buyer. Then they have 3 days to void. Paragraph 4 of that addendum, it's over. If you don't get approved for your loan by that 21 days, you're going to settlement or you're going to be in default. Okay, so it's written in stone, paragraph 35. This is the day that one ends. So your buyer either has to get turned down in that 21 days or go to settlement. So if you're the listing agent, you would probably want paragraph 4, all right?
Mhm.
Because if they don't get turned down, but think of the flip of that. They don't get turned down, but they get turned down on the 30th day. You still don't have a contract, right? So it doesn't matter which one you use. I mean, you're going to go after the buyer's earnest money deposit, probably, but the contingency is automatically dead in number 4 if you don't get approved. I mean, get turned down in that whatever days you put in there. Okay?
Now, to remove the finance contingency, if we remove it, then what?
Well, then they've got to go to settlement.
Right, and if anything
If
happens after that,
if they get turned down later, they're going to be in default.
in default.
So if you use paragraph 3,
Mhm.
I wouldn't remove the financing contingency until they sent me a notice to void.
Okay. Right.
Because why would you remove it, in 21 days and then find out your buyer something happened and they get turned down? But if they don't send us the notice that we have 3 days to void or go forward, you still have that contingency and they could still get turned down and get out of the contract. But if you remove the financing contingency and then something happens to get turned down later, they're going to be in default. So I generally just let mine ride until they send a notice over. Okay.
I wonder if you need, like, you don't make it on settlement date and you need an extra 7 days. Okay.
They don't
then
have to give it to you.
I know. And then the listing agent, say you're representing the buyer, and the listing agent said, we will extend it 1 week if you remove the finance contingency. And
Well, then I would have a heart-to-heart with my buyer and say, look, if they couldn't get it done in this time, and they don't get it done in that next week at midnight on that day, you're in default, and you're subject to damages. So do you want to get rejected for your loan now to get out of this, or go forward? And I've seen agents come back and say, well, the seller said yes, but we want an addition. We want the deposit increased by X amount of dollars. To me, that makes no sense at all, because the seller's still not entitled to it unless the buyer releases it. I could see saying, we want $1,000 or $2,000 certified funds not part of this contract delivered for the extension, because we're going to have these additional costs. And buyers just don't get it. The seller's already lined up their movers. They've already, they've got additional payments, etc. Why should they be so nice and just give you 7 more days because you asked for it? There's financial consequences. So
well, most of them want it per diem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want it up front, not at settlement.
Yeah. And many times the lender is willing to pay. If the lender is the cause of the delay, most of my lenders will pay it, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, they got to, and that's got to be handled properly also, because that might be considered a, you know, an inducement for the loan. It might be, you know, but that's their problem there because they're the lender, right? But the seller doesn't have to give the extension. That's why in my contracts, and I know that it's hard to do in a competitive market, but I use 45 days for settlement, and we can always move it up. Okay, we can always move it up. Okay. Any other questions?
Larry, in the addendum that we accept a settlement extension, can we add the buyers agree to forfeit the earnest money deposit and give the earnest money deposit to the seller as damage?
No, there cannot be damages. There are no such thing as damages in the state of Virginia. And that's why it says it's, you know, I mean, as damages, yes, but not liquidated, not as a penalty. I'm sorry.
Ah, okay, okay.
Okay. Penalties are not allowed in Virginia under contract law.
But we can put this in the extension addendum.
Yeah, but you know, discuss with your buyer what they're agreeing to, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, be careful. And I realize it's a competitive market, but most sellers don't want to start over unless prices have gone up in the last 30 days. Okay, so have a heart-to-heart with your buyer. Make sure that your lender can do what they say. Just following strict TRID guidelines. Remember, under strict TRID guidelines, they can't even make a formal written application until there's a contract. Okay, and once they make an application, okay, written application, the lender has to give them within 3 days the loan estimate, and then they have 10 days to give intent to proceed. Okay, and the only fee that the lender can get up to that point is a credit check fee until they give intent to proceed. So you can burn up a lot of days if they follow strict guidelines from TRID. I mean, things can be sped up, but make sure your lenders can do what they're saying. Okay, show me a track history. You know, so any other questions? That's a good session. I will see you guys Wednesday, 11 o'clock. We will be going over the well and septic inspection addendums and talking about well and septic. Okay.
Thank you, Larry.
No other questions. I will see you guys on Wednesday at 11.
Thank you, Mr. Larry.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thank
I
you, Larry.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Chair.